Public and Neighborhood Services. So I report to Rob, so he's gonna help me with this presentation. So as y'all know, we had the 2019 jail bond that voters approved of the propositions totaling 90.76 million. Although the bonds were approved, the tax rate must be approved in order to implement those projects. And the pandemic, unfortunately impacted all of the schedules of the geo bond projects. So these are the projects that were approved. And as you can see, the original dates and then the current dates for design and construction, you can see a shift of almost all of them. And as you can see, ours is, so we have currently, we have the funding for design, and then the construction would be planned for 2025. So this is how the schedule is laid out in the capital improvement plan that is presented to City Council each year. Back in April, we came and had a presentation on nonprofit and for-profit partnerships and privatization. I'm going to just quickly run over the options that we presented to y'all. This is a much scaled down version of what that presentation was at that time. So the first option we spoke about was a nonprofit agreement. So it's an agreement between like ourselves as city and then a 501c3 such as humane societies, and we gave examples of the Brazoria County SPCA who has an agreement with cities of Lake Jackson, Freeport, and Clute, and then the Humane Society of North Texas who partners with Keller, South Lake, Colleyville. So this was one of the options that we presented to y'all back in April. Another partnership we presented was city to city, so contracts between two cities, like Missouri City and Stafford have a partnership right now, and so they have an agreement that handles their animal control and the animal shelter side. So city to city is a partnership option. Oh, sorry, too many clicks. And so another option is city-county partnership. So again, it's just an agreement between the city and the county to handle those shelter operations. There's, you know, in each one, there's various elements of the contract of who handles what and who does not handle what. All of those terms are detailed and spelled out in those agreements. And examples we gave with this one was Williamson County and San Marcos Regional Animal Shelter. And so when we walked through those, we instructed that we were researching all of those options and would be coming back with some details after we went through the research. And then I will turn it over to Rob to handle.
Yeah, so just like Dawn was mentioning earlier, animal care is one of the top priorities for us to go figure out right now. This concept of regionalization, as she mentioned, we started way earlier this year, and then a lot of stuff has happened in between. We are now picking it back up and starting to go into more in-depth research. She laid out several different options there. We don't know which direction we're going. We don't know the timelines. There's a lot of questions around it. We don't know those answers yet. We are at the very, very beginning stages of assembling that internal team to help us address what that looks like moving forward. But all these will be investigated as we kind of move forward and continue to look at that. We will come back to the Animal Advisory Board with what we find and give you all updates on those things, as well as what's time frames, any questions, anything we got to go back and do additional research on, what did we miss type of thing. We're going to come back to the Animal Advisory Board and do that. And then ultimately we'll take it to our city council for a workshop, public hearings, those types of things for their consideration as we move forward. So that is kind of how we're moving forward in that direction, but y'all will be kind of in the loop as we move forward. So,
I have some questions. Yes, who asked for regionalization? Because I don't think it came from the board, and I don't think it came from anybody here.
Yeah, so it's part of how we look at, you know, it being kind of this council priority for shelter operations. We want to make sure that we're doing the best that we absolutely can in that area. We want to be able to leverage our partnerships as a region, what's best for the animals, what's best for adoptions, what's best for fosters, those types of things, rather than competing for the limited amount of resources. Why not join forces at that? So those are things that we're investigating and looking into. And like I said, we'll be back before the board when we are ready.
Will city council be told, will city council be told what we think?
Absolutely.
Will we have, okay, so we will have an opportunity to say something.
Yes.
And also it bothers me that, we're not hiring a position for a director because we're putting off for this conversation. I would like to, I think everything that's happened, personally, I like Sugar Land having oversight over Sugar Land, and I personally, and I think with the bond and Sugar Land residents finding a shelter here, I'm not for regionalization. I am not for a county or another city partnership. I want a Sugar Land shelter. Since we're not hiring somebody, I would like that question, the research, to come to the board at the next meeting and for us to give our opinions to city council so that we can either go down this road and hire somebody that way or not go down this road and hire somebody to stay here long term. I think we need to know what our positions are.
Sorry, could you repeat the request again?
I just like to make our decision regarding regionalization soon so we can hire a superintendent to fulfill the vision that we see. And I think that the indecision is putting that on. Yes.
Yeah, and as far as coming back to the board, we're not ready to come back next week. There's just, we're still trying to form the internal team to do the proper research to come back before y'all. It's gonna take us some time. And so that is one of the big reasons we have Captain Cornelius and Battalion Chief King on board, is to help us with that in the interim. And so that's kind of where, once we get the internal research done, once we've vetted all these options, we'll do that before you.
Just hiring and staffing is a board priority.
Absolutely.
I have a question. The initialization of the regionalization come from city council? Is that where that originated? Where did it originate? Because as Jenna said, it didn't come from the board. We never discussed a regional site, ever.
Sorry.
The idea of the regionalization.
I'm asking for the question.
Oh, no, repeat it, yes, ma'am.
Yes, she needs to.
I understand. So the question was, where did the regionalization suggestion come from? It was made by city council at the retreat a year ago, and they asked us to look into it. And so staff has been looking at other cities, other counties, and it's a lot of information to try to put together and determine what would really be best.
There is some concern that at the planning retreat, city council was told that this board made or voted last April of 2022 for regionalization. I can emphatically state that neither my notes, all my documentation from that meeting, my recollection, my personal notes did not include a vote to regionalize animal care. You presented the things that Dawn condensed, you presented those to us, but that did not happen. I would happily entertain a motion to review the April 2022 minutes so that we can make certain and have evidence that such a vote did not occur in our.
And what I will say is, you didn't vote on it.
Okay.
It was presented to you, but I don't recall ever having a vote on it.
We didn't.
Right.
We did not.
So there may be some, little bit of misinformation, some clarification needs to be done on that part, but my understanding was, and I've been to most of your board meetings, and I don't recall us calling for a vote. It was, we approached the topic, we researched, we started looking into it, and then.
And so then was the discussion at council planning retreat that it was introduced to us in April 2022? Is that why they are of the opinion that this was presented to us, or is that why they are having discussion about us in
No,
that
I
meeting?
mean, and I mentioned this a little while ago, the discussion around regionalization isn't new. It wasn't as a result of this latest retreat. It was a topic that was discussed a year ago. And it was something that we were charged to go explore and research. And we started that research and exploring with the board, and then we stopped when everything else happened. And so we revisited it, and now we're moving forward.
So Dawn and Don were the two people that we were told were going to prepare that? Do we have, will we pick up where they left off, or if they did, in fact?
Yeah, so I'm gonna help fill in with that. As Don laid out, there's a lot of things going on in the shelter, and I'm trying to help Don with that. Don will be part of the team. We have some legal folks on the board. We have our budget folks. We have a ton of folks on board to answer a lot of different questions and look at this from various lenses to make sure that we have those bases and those questions addressed as part of the plan. And so yes, we'll be coming back to the board, and presenting those things back.
Could I just say that I think I've stated many times on this board that I want to see all the different scenarios that we might consider. And I want us to be fiscally responsible and all of those same things that city council, I'm sure, would want us to be. But I definitely want us to see the comparisons and the data before it's said that we have made a decision on anything. Thank you.
I remember that meeting and what you just said when it was presented, and in light of the change and removal and et cetera of prior shelter staff that was obviously come home. I agree. I would like to see more information. Understand it's going to take a lot of time with some of these partnerships, but I remember when it was presented, the information that Don went over. But I think also, I'm looking forward to seeing the information because I think the hoarding case demonstrates that we clearly needed partnerships, right? When you showed us the list of everybody external that was helping, the city, from your data, to me, the city could not have handled that hoarding case without those external partnerships. So whether we're using the term regionalization or partnerships, I mean, City of Houston Bark has a great partnership with a local nonprofit. So I think for you guys to do your due diligence and bring those findings back to us and see what is a viable partnership or a resource that we can even have on hold for cases of the hoarding case. But again, I look forward to seeing that information and seeing the research into that pickup where we left off. Because just as Dawn was going through the numbers, I mean, you mentioned Best Friends of Houston made it possible. So for us to ignore the need, the need of those partnerships, I think the board has a responsibility to look into what your findings are to see in what capacity we might need that partnership down the road, what that looks like.
I think the partnership part of it is great, but I just want to be careful. Based on what you said, I would not interchangeably use regionalization of a physical shelter and partnerships.
Correct.
I see
No, I
those
agree.
as two
I
different
agree.
things.
I had a question.
In thinking about these issues,
Oh,
in considering these issues, we need to understand that the general obligation bond money availability is not available for the short run issues. We have to look at the capacity that we have and the capacity that we would need from time to time as it goes up and down over the next 2 or 3 years. We won't have the bond money to look to solve the problem. We're gonna have to consider what we do with our existing capacity and whether we need to do temporary or short-term additions to that capacity to handle our problems. We can't get to a situation where the animals suffer because the capacity is not there.
So the statement was, just, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm gonna try my best to summarize it, was to understand the capacity moving forward in the interim, understanding that the bond dollars won't be available for the program as we move forward.
Well, the information that we've been given is that the current plan for something being actually constructed and existing is 2025 at the earliest. And who knows if that's realistic. Meanwhile, I take it that that bond money is not available for our short-term problem solving, okay?
That's right.
So we have the shelter that we have that was constructed some time ago, hasn't really been expanded very much, and yet the city has grown, the number of animals have grown.
Yep.
We have a capacity issue to think about, and we need to think about what we do to solve the time between right now and 2025, 2026, whatever, because that time frame is not covered by that money. And city council has to consider, how do we make this work? Perhaps this regionalization thought is a thought to deal with that, but it's not the only thought. We need to consider, how do we do it if we are operating on our own? We can't just let it sit there and then the problem happens and people scurry around and it's too late to solve it. We need to think about it now. This issue's been brought up before this board a number of times from a long time ago, but I can document from January to April and so forth of times that it has been brought up to staff and to this board, and it really hasn't been approached in a way of getting a complete solution to the problem of the next 3 to 5 years.
No, you're right. You know, with regionalization, don't know the timing of it and how does that plan get implemented, but there's gonna be a need for that interim plan, which is what you're asking for. Is what does that interim plan look like, from going forward, if you will? Is it I don't know if it's a 1 year, I don't know if it's a 5 year deal, but whatever that interim plan is, making sure that it's funded appropriately as we move forward.
Well, to get back to the recent euthanasia problem, the incident that we had, how much of that problem is related to capacity shortfall? Okay? We don't want to have that situation occur in the future for any reason, and if the city can provide enough space to where, if that's what happens, this sort of thing happens because of constraints, then the city should be thinking about it now ahead of time.
Any other questions?
Possible criminal, was there criminal activity associated with the euthanasia that happened, with those staff members that were terminated? Is there an update on those investigations with those federal agencies, or?
I will pass that off to Mary.
Okay, so
She's asking about an update on the criminal cases, that we had been coordinating with state and federal agencies.
Okay, so the DEA and the State Veterinary Board have at this point into their investigation as far as the city behavior. I do not know the status of any other organizations that we have worked with because they are looking through all of our notes, any sorts of medication we have received, and anything of that nature. So at this point, we are confident from talking to them in the police department's inquiry that we only had policy violations of our employees, that our employees did not violate any state or federal laws. So, but the DEA and State Veterinary Board investigation are, I believe, are still ongoing as far as any of our other partners. I don't have information on that. I don't feel comfortable saying, hey, can you stop your investigation? Tell me what you think about somebody else. So we don't have an update on that. We have talked to the DA's office animal cruelty investigator, and through our discussions, he's comfortable that in this case, it was a policy violation that because the animals were sedated prior to euthanasia, there was no abuse of those animals. And we have also talked to Health and Human Services, and we feel that based on their investigation, that our employees did not create any criminal violations. But like I said, those are two organizations, the DEA and the State Veterinary Board, are investigating our partners as well. I don't know the outcome of those investigations.